no teeth issues. The teeth are back. Hold on. Hey church, welcome to Wednesday Voices. I'm so excited to see you in a little bit together in our small groups on Zoom. It'll be great to see our faces even though it'll be online. Today we're going to chat about this idea of bearing false witness. And I don't know about you, but I had no idea what that meant. It's the 8th commandment, so you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And I understand that it meant like don't lie, but I feel like it could be more if it's a commandment.
So in the Small Catechism, as Luther was explaining what this commandment means, he said, we're to fear and love God so that we don't tell lies about our neighbors, betray or slander them, or destroy their reputations. So all the things we shouldn't do. But then he said, instead, what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to come to their defense, that we're supposed to speak well of them, and that we're trying to interpret everything that they do in the best possible light. That's a lot.
What I find interesting in this that Martin Luther talks about is this second part. This defense, this speak well and interpret everything people do in the best possible light. So I want you to grab your piece of paper and your pen that's close by you. And I want you to, what comes to mind, think about what comes to mind when you hear the word defend or defense. For me, what comes to mind is act, speak, do, fight. How about speak well? What comes to mind? Honor, love, truth, honesty, stories is what comes to mind for me. How about interpreting everything people do in the best possible light? There's a lot there, so what comes to mind? For me, it's kind of the phrase, the benefit of the doubt, give people the benefit of a doubt, that their intent is good, right? But another way of looking at it is being brave and vulnerable and asking questions and being curious to kind of dig deeper into the impact more than the intent.
So what's hard about this commandment is that it shows up in two ways. It's the things that we're not supposed to do, the things that are hurtful, when we say things that are untrue about other people, when we say things that are untrue about ourselves. But then there's those moments where we're called to actively do something positive, to help and encourage and tell the truth about somebody else, to come to their defense when somebody's not telling the truth about who they are. And Ellen's got some great stories about both of those.
So for me, when I'm thinking about this, there are two stories that come to mind. One is when I was probably about 12 years old. We were playing up in our neighborhood, and I have a brother who happens to be deaf. And someone called him the R word. And I get super defensive when it comes to my brother. And so I immediately was like, that's not okay. He is not that. And kind of went into defense mode with my brother, of standing up for him, of speaking the truth, of trying to, stand up for his story and who he is and honor him. The second story that comes to mind is there was a time that I was talking to someone that my sister knew. And as we were, this was a stranger for me, but he had said that he was really glad that I wasn't like my sister. And I was so shocked that I kind of was just paralyzed. And I didn't come to her defense. I didn't shed light into the wonderful person who she is. I kind of just shut down because he was someone that was older than me and had more authority, and I was kind of scared of what would happen. And I was so paralyzed that I didn't say anything. So there's times in our lives where we kind of struggle with this. And for me, that is one way I told a lie about my sister is I didn't defend her. I didn't act. I let that truth of this person talking bad about her kind of stay there.
So we want to give you some time to think about a moment in your life, either where you didn't tell the truth about yourself or somebody else, or think about a time when you came to somebody's defense, when you looked at what they were trying to do in this world in the best possible light. We'll give you some time to write those down, think about those moments.
So I think about not telling lies. It's actually actively seeking out truth, right? Seeking to understand people, to understand other people's experiences and stories that might be different than ours. And Jesus was really good at this. Jesus talked to people that were out on the margins. And if you look at the stories and the people that Jesus interacted, it points to who we should go out and seek out to understand, that they have something to teach us. And that's one way of seeking out truth and not telling lies, is going to learn about other people.
There's a story in Luke's gospel. It's one you may have heard of. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. And Jesus tells it because there's a lawyer who stands up, and the gospel says he does it to test Jesus. He says, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus says, "What does it say? What's in the law?" It says, follow the commandments, do those kinds of things. Love your neighbor as yourself. And the lawyer says, "Okay, fine. Who's my neighbor?" And I think he asks the question as sort of a way to get out of doing the work, trying to narrow that scope of who your neighbor is. But Jesus takes his question and puts it in the best possible light. He sees it as a genuine question, and so he tells him a story. But that story invites an opening up, a broadening, a expansive picture of who God is, who our neighbors are, how do we care for one another. And it's this beautiful example of both honoring somebody's questions, somebody's curiosity, seeing what they're doing in the best possible light, but also getting curious and wondering more about what it means to live in this world.
So how do you do that? How do you actively seek out getting, truth from other people? So one thing that comes to mind is asking questions and being curious, admitting when we don't know the answer, and listening to those around us and that their experience may be different than ours. But we don't always know that their experience is different if we don't think about, reflecting on our own experiences, right? That one example that I can think of is in hearing culture. Pointing is actually something that is, you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to point at people when you're talking about them. But actually in deaf culture, my brother tends to point at people when he's talking to them, even if we don't know them. So it's like, hey, that person over there, and points to them. And that's a difference in culture. And if I don't ask questions and talk to him about hey, in my culture, this is rude. But can you tell me more about how you use that, and that it's not rude? And so if I'm not willing to kind of take that step and get to know other cultures or ask questions or read books or reflect on myself, I don't get to learn that difference. Right now, there's a lot of conversation around all lives matter, Black lives matter, blue lives matter, etc. Whose story is being told and what truth needs to be said, and whose lives need to be acknowledged that they matter, that historically Black lives have not mattered. And that's important for us to think about. And what is that truth being told in each of those? And who would Jesus be telling us to say whose lives matters? Jesus went out to people that were marginalized and pushed to the side. And so that's important to acknowledge in this truth seeking of, I'm curious as to what other hashtags seem to show a pattern of injustice. So I want you to think about that. What are things going on that show a pattern of injustice and truth seeking and truth telling that we're listening to or we're not listening to right now? So when we think and look at that thou shalt not bear witness, it's not necessarily about, it's about not doing something, but more importantly, it's about doing something. It's about honoring people and telling people's stories and listening to people, and being truth tellers and truth seekers in the world.